All right, welcome back. We've reached the final chapter in this lesson, getting started with the CSS, and we're going to talk a little bit more about controlling an element's dimensions. So I showed display as a property and being able to change something from being an inline element to being a block level element. Now there are many ways that you can adjust the display of an element. You can set it to display inline, to be block, to display like a list item, to display like a table cell. You could display it flex, which is what's called flexbox, and so on and so forth. You can even do display none, which makes an element disappear from the page. I do not recommend doing that because once you do that, the content of that element becomes completely unavailable to anyone who's using assistive technology, like a screen reader. So remember this, we looked at the element that was an inline element by default, and when we set it to block, it jumped to its own line. We also could change it to inline block, and then we saw that it actually had the dimensions and it had the padding, but it was sitting in line as though it was an inline element, even though it had that dimensioning. So that's what display does. Another way we can manipulate the box is actually to apply shadows to it. So this works in much the same way as the text shadow. We have a horizontal offset and a vertical offset. We have a blur radius, but then we have this other optional property called spread, which has to do with how much of the shadow spreads into the blur radius. And then finally, the color of the box shadow. And when we remove all of the comments in there, this is what we end up with. So let's take a look at that one in the browser as well. If I jump over to this Sepia Officinalis, go ahead and apply a shadow. You can see it starting to peek in there as I fill it in. And there we go. I decided to leave out the spread. And if I increase the horizontal and then increase the vertical, you can see the box being added behind it. So it's as though the box is actually white, even though it has no background color. So it's not a true shadow, it's a rendering of a shadow around the element. It's an important distinction to make. I can go ahead and add that same shadow to the paragraph, blur it out a bit. And you can see if I let it peek up a bit that it actually gives you a good sense of the size of the box and where the box for this paragraph element ends. You can also add multiple shadows and start to make this look really gaudy. And that kind of gives you a sense of what box shadow can do. So box shadow also has another keyword that you can use in it, which is called inset. And with inset, you can actually create shadows within the element. Now, Web Standard Sherpa used this to great effect. If you inspect the main article on the page, what you'll see is that it has both an external box shadow and an internal box shadow. Now it's worth noting they also use border radius to curve the corners and that the box shadow actually hugs to that. So in this chapter, we discussed the different display types and box shadows. So finally, in assignment 9, I want you to explore the box model and the different display modes. I want you to add borders and padding to each of the elements on your pages and play with the different display modes, especially inline and inline block. How do manipulating these different display modes affect the way the elements lay out with respect to one another? How does adjusting the element's size help add weight to it or diminish its visibility compared to other elements? Publish your work on GitHub and post a link to the forum along with your observations. And finally, since we're at the end of this lesson, I want you to go ahead and take quiz number 3. I'll see you in the next lesson where we tuck into quite a bit more CSS.